Hey, it's Mark, and here's what Entenmann pound cake taught me about relationships. This pound cake makes me smile. I smile when I see the logo of the brand. I smile when anybody says pound cake, and here's why. So my parents would always take us to work with them. They owned stores all around Chicago, and one of their stores was at the corner of Western, Elston, and Diversey in the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago. And when we would go to work with them at this store, my dad would say to us, hey, if you boys are good, I'll take you to George's, and I will get you a special piece of his special pound cake. And George's was a little corner diner, 2 storefronts down from my parents' store. And so sure enough, my brothers and I would try to be good, and my dad would say, all right, come on, we'll go to George's. And we'd walk out of the store, we'd walk down 2 storefronts, and we'd walk into George's. If you called a casting agency and said, we need a scene in a Chicago greasy spoon diner, that was George's. And in my mind, I remember George with the white apron and the white shirt, and we would go in and we'd sit at the counter, you know, the little swivel chairs, and my dad would say, George, can we get 3 pieces of that special pound cake of yours for my 3 boys? They were good today. And George would say, oh, of course, Mr. Hands. And he'd turn around and he'd go to the counter and he'd come back and he would serve us on a plate this beautiful piece of golden buttery pound cake. So George would serve us the pound cake on a plate, and my dad and George would talk about, oh, this is an old family recipe. Oh, and he has to work so hard in the kitchen to make this beautiful, beautiful pound cake. And it was a memory, a core memory of mine as a kid growing up, was going to George's for pound cake. Years later, I mean, this is probably like 10 years ago, I said something to my dad about, oh, you remember George's Diner? You used to take us there, you know, for his homemade pound cake. And my dad said, what? And I said, George, you know, he'd take us there and he made that old family recipe, the homemade pound cake. And my dad looks at me and goes, what are you, nuts? That was Entenmann's. He would take it out of the package and put it on the plate and serve it up to you 3 kids. Now, my childhood was not all lies, but it brings up an important lesson, which is my dad was just trying to make things extra special for us. Sure, he could have told us that it was Entenmann straight out of the box, but he gave us this story that made it so special, and we looked forward to going to George's, and we behaved when we were with him so we could go to George's. And so I think about this a lot in my relationships, in my professional relationships, in my relationships with my family and my wife and my friends, is I like to try to make things special. But there's a caution, and that is not everything can be or should be special. This is a really hard thing for me because I try to make everything special. Every night when I make dinner for my family, I fold the napkins, I put a fork and a knife and a spoon, and I use what's called a charger plate. So we have a plate and then another plate and a bowl and a water glass, and I try to make everything so special. If I'm making Greek food, I play Greek music. And it wasn't until a few months ago I was talking with a friend and they said, do you think anybody cares about the forks and the knives and the music? Or do you think they'd rather just be able to sit down and talk with you at dinner? And I had a moment of realization, which was sometimes the simplest things are very special, like pound cake. I'm Mark from Chicago. Thanks for watching.